This episode is brought to you by BunnySlippers.com. Check out their cool Highland cow slippers. I'm not going to sing Wooly Bully this episode. So check out the really shaggy, cool-looking slippers that they have over there at BunnySlippers.com on the show. Welcome back, everyone, to the People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. I am your host, D.B. Spitzer. Today we will be diving into the depths of ancient Egypt, talking about Nephren-Ka, and some talk about Nitocris as well, and a poem that was supposed to be on the show a while back is now back on, even though it was on a live episode. But here we go again. And thank you once again for listening to The People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. This is episode 1, series 11, Ancient Egypt, Nephren-Ka, Nitocris. We have David Heath back talking about stuff, and of course, Ken Hite. So, I don't know, buckle your sarcophagus. Anyway, thanks for listening to People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. You can find us everywhere that you find podcasts. Look for us at Stitcher. We're also on Spotify. And look for Black Clock Audio Tales, PGttCM in social media, and that's where you'll find us. Thank you again, and donate some money to the show, paypal.me/PGttCM, or you can go to PGttCM.com and learn how to donate there. Thank you again so much, and let's talk to Ken Hite about Nephren-Ka. All right, I hope I said that right, Ken. Let's go. Hey, everyone, we are back with...
Sure.
Hey, everyone, we are back with Ken Hite, and hey, Ken, how have you been doing these days?
I've been good. I just got back from California, and before that I just got back from Florida, so I have been under actual God's sunlight instead of the gray, miserable hell that is usually above Chicago in February.
Wow.
So I lucked out. Good, well planned, Ken. Handshakes all around.
What conventions or what festivals were those?
There's a game store, an excellent game store called the Adventure Game Store in Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
That brings me down every year right around the beginning of February for a store visit, along with other area designers, and Will Heinmarch comes down sometimes, Darcy Ross, Hal Mangold. So it's sort of a gathering of designers, and then we put on an event in the store that is a workshop, and it's a Q&A, and it's how do you get my game started, and what do I do, and so it's really focused, and it's really great. And Adventure Game Store does that. Brian Dalrymple, the guy who runs it, puts it together. It's a terrific thing. And did I mention it's in Fort Lauderdale in February?
Yeah.
So well worth going to for me. And then after that, there's the brand new first, and one hopes first of many, Proto-Spiels in Sarasota, Florida at the Ringling College of Art and Design. That is, they teach game design amongst the other narrative studies programs there, both computer games and tabletop games. And this is the first Proto-Spiel they've run for tabletop designers to come out, show off new things, and then also other designers, sort of seminars and panels. And again, I was down there with Will Heinmarch, Darcy Ross, Jason Morningstar, Banana Chan, for Tessa, just a bunch of great designers. Metatopia in the sun, I guess you'd call it. And we had a good time, and it was a really good show. And that was like the weekend of the 8th, I'll say, of February. And they'll be doing that, I'm sure, year and year. So go to the Ringling College website if you are in Florida or in February and show off your game design.
Nice.
Or just see me, because God willing, I'll be back.
Yeah.
And then the last convention was DundraCon in California, where I go every year because, again, February. So that's in this is its last year in San Ramon. Next year it moves to Santa Clara, so it'll be a little more accessible for Bay Area types.
Cool.
Or if you are not even a Bay Area type, you can fly into San Jose and it'll be great fun. So DundraCon is the oldest D&D convention in America. I think it's the same age as GothCon in Sweden, so it's coeval with the oldest in the world.
Cool.
And it has been a straight-up tabletop role-playing focused convention forever, and I go out there and I do a long-running panel on city creation and city design, and I do a long-running pastries, and it's good fun for everyone. And again, sunlight. So all of that puts me in a tip-top mood, as does getting to come home and see my lovely wife and lovely cat, who have missed me while they've been here in the miserable cold.
Nice. I mean, nice that you got to get out into the warm and everything. But
yes, it is. It is very nice that I got to go out.
Cool.
And it's nice that Sheila didn't change the locks on me and make me stay out in the winter.
Yeah, that's also. So I also know that you have a extended Kickstarter going on for Lovecraftian. No, it is. What's it called?
It's Tour to Lovecraft: The Destinations. It's the second volume of my Tour to Lovecraft series, focusing on the places in Lovecraft's fiction, which no one really seems to have written a book about, so I did. And what we did, we ran the Kickstarter back in 2017, and then I had to design vampires for a year, so that put the book off. But now the book is done, and you can, if you're listening to this right now, in February of 2020, you can go to atomicovermind.com and get onto the back end of the Kickstarter and join it late at almost the same low rates you could have joined it for back in 2017. Ooh. And then you'll be put into the backer kit, and you'll get the advanced shipping and everything else, just as though you'd backed it 3 years ago. 2.5 years ago. Let's be fair to me.
Okay. All right. So I didn't just ask you to come on to talk about your recent travel plans and
although that was riveting, wasn't it? Wasn't
yes.
that great stuff? That was top-notch content. Hashtag.
I did want to talk to you about we're getting to that point in the Cthulhu Mythos timeline that we're getting to ancient Egypt, and I wanted to ask you about Nephren-Ka. Did I say that right that time?
You did. You got it right.
Oh,
Good
cool.
for you.
All right. And you're my go-to guy when it comes to the Cthulhu Mythos and that
so
kind of
sweet.
stuff. Well, hey, yeah. And what can you tell us about Nephren-Ka?
Well, we learn Nephren-Ka's name in The Outsider when the titular outsider realizes that he will have to remain an outsider and frolic amongst the catacombs of Nephren-Ka in the sealed and unknown valley of Hadoth by the Nile. Ooh. And that's what our buddy the outsider shares with us, because it turns out he was a ghoul, he was a monster, he was not just a dude, and he is able to join that hellish court. And the unnamed feasts of Nitocris beneath the Great Pyramid is another person that he gets to hang out with. So we know that Nephren-Ka is an Egyptian figure from that, and we know that he has got something to do with the sealed and unknown valley of Hadoth. We know that he's in some catacombs. That's what we know as of the outsider. And then we learn that our boy Nephren-Ka shows up in the case of Charles Dexter Ward as sort of a ceremonial closing, where Kerwin signs off with Nephren-Ka nigh Hadoth, sort of a as though if you were a devout Christian, you'd sign off with Christ is living, or if you were a devout Cthulhuist, you'd sign off with Cthulhu Fatan. So it's apparently a sort of an expression. And again, we know that Kerwin is very involved with digging up dead people, so we have another ghoul connection there possibly. And then Nephren-Ka takes sort of a turn, and we learn that in Haunter of the Dark, he was a pharaoh, and he built around this shining trapezohedron a temple with a windowless crypt, and did that which caused his name to be stricken from all monuments and records. And then it slept in the ruins of that evil fane, which the priests and the new pharaoh had destroyed. And so we assume that the fane was perhaps in Hadoth, where our boy Nephren-Ka is still lurking in his catacombs, because in the Haunter of the Dark, we learn that Enoch Bowen goes out and digs it up from a mysterious place by the Nile, which we very much suspect is Hadoth, and brings it back. And that's the story of Nephren-Ka. And then it gets even more exciting, depending on whether or not we consider Robert Bloch a canonical source on Nephren-Ka or not. But he is the next guy that goes after him.
All right, and what does Bloch have to say about Nephren-Ka?
Bloch, and Lovecraft does not say this in so many words, but Bloch identifies Nephren-Ka as the pharaoh that was either possessed by or an avatar of Nyarlathotep. In The Fane of the Black Pharaoh, Bloch describes Nephren-Ka as a pharaoh of no known dynasty, a priestly usurper, and then we know from Lovecraft that at one time the mighty messenger did in antique and shadowy chem take the form of man. And so we know that Nyarlathotep took the form of a human being in ancient Egypt, but it is not specifically that he took the form of Nephren-Ka, but he might have.
Yeah, okay.
So that's what we learn. And then Bloch goes sort of on and on in more detail about the sort of Egyptian mythos, because Bloch thought the Egyptian mythos was cool. And but most of his Nephren-Ka information shows up in The Fane of the Black Pharaoh, which was written in 1937, and may or may not have been written in. He may or may not have been able to show Lovecraft the manuscript. We know that it comes out in just as Lovecraft it dies, basically, in Weird Tales, but we don't know how early Bloch wrote it and whether or not he sent it to him. There's no correspondence that says that Lovecraft saw it or didn't see it, so we don't know.
Okay. Did Lynn Carter or Lynn Carter or August Derleth get their hands on it or get weird with it in any way? Or
it would not amaze me to find out that Nephren-Ka shows up in their various catalogs of stuff. I don't think that they became central characters of anything.
Okay.
Although it would not amaze me. It looks like there is a story called The Strange Doom of Enos Harker, Lynn Carter and Robert Price. And that was a Lynn Carter project that Robert Price finished, or how exactly that works.
Okay.
That is also apparently a Nephren-Ka sighting.
All right.
If you will. But by then, I think that the blood is mighty thin. The ichor is getting pretty watery at that level.
Yeah, no, I think you're just getting the essence of Nephren-Ka at that point.
Yeah, and then he shows up in Call of Cthulhu scenarios, where Keith Herbert introduces him as the head of the Brotherhood of the Black Pharaoh, implying that Nyarlathotep reincarnates over time in that same avatar form.
Gotcha.
But that's game material, and you might even consider that even more dubious than a Lynn Carter story.
But more widely read.
More widely read, certainly. And certainly better written.
Sure.
Because it's by Keith Herbert.
Yeah.
But the game is doing different things than fiction does, and so to judge them on the same standards is it's bootless. It doesn't do anything. It accomplishes nothing. But if you're talking about the pure quill Nephren-Ka, we know Lovecraft and arguably Bloch, on the grounds that Bloch might have shown Nephren-Ka his story to Lovecraft, or they discussed obviously Nyarlathotep a great deal in the letters. You know that.
All right, cool. And honestly, that's all I got for Nephren-Ka.
Well, I mean, the fun thing, once you have a pretend pharaoh, you get to assign him a pretend timeline.
Oh yeah.
And you start looking for when exactly is Nephren-Ka, right?
Okay. So
we know that he has to be at least the same time as the Minoan fishermen who haul up the trapezohedron from the ocean bottom, because they sell it to him, right? It goes, it's the serpent men have it in Valusia. Valusia sinks and becomes the Mediterranean. The Minoan fishermen pull it up. They sell it to the Egyptians. So we know that he must be a Middle Kingdom pharaoh because that's when the Minoans are running around.
Sure.
Block says that Fables placed his reign in almost biblical, which either means just before, during the Hyksos era, or just after the end of Bible times in like the 7th or 8th century BC.
Okay.
And so I think, though, that the sort of clinching detail comes from the fact that in Shadow Out of Time, our buddy Peasley speaks to a Egyptian named Kefnes of the 14th dynasty, and Kefnes reveals the hideous secret of Nyarlathotep to Peasley. And who better to be in a position to reveal the hideous secret of Nyarlathotep than a guy who's around during Nephren-Ka's reign, right?
Okay, yeah.
Doesn't that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense to me.
So the 14th dynasty, we're happy to know, has a bunch of total chaos. It's an era of when Egypt has basically been invaded by the Hyksos. There's a bunch of sort of pharaohs showing up and leaving no records themselves. We have lots of empty, chaotic space in which to put Nephren-Ka. And there is at least one pharaoh named Apep, who is named literally after the giant chaos serpent that wars against Ra.
Okay.
So we know that worshiping evil gods is a thing in the 14th dynasty. We know that there's a pharaoh named Apep, which is a bad sign all the way around. And then in the 15th dynasty, right after it, we have another pharaoh, not just another pharaoh Apep, but we also have a pharaoh named Neb-Kepeshra, which is not that far from Nephren-Ka, and that he worshipped Set, who we all remember from Conan as being no good.
Yeah.
Now the sad part of this is that the Libyan people considered Apep and Set their gods, and one of the reasons Set is seen as a tricky bad god is he's the god of foreigners.
Okay.
Who are up to no good traditionally. And so when the Hyksos invade, they sort of appoint the gods of foreigners as their own gods a lot. And so there are periods when Set is being worshipped straight up like he was, Thoth or somebody. And it's just because, well, we're foreigners, we're in charge, therefore our god is in charge. You say our god is Set, boom, there we go. And that's the sort of boring Egyptological explanation of it. But if we've got a series of gods worshiping chaos serpents and Set, I don't think that a god that worships Nyarlathotep, the blind ape of truth, is too far out of the world there. I think that we got something going on. So I think 14th dynasty is your gold mine for our buddy Nephren-Ka.
All right, so we know who and we know where. Sounds pretty good.
Yeah. And if you care, his name means Nepher, which is good or beautiful, Ren, which is his true name, Ka, spirit, which argues that his true name is a beautiful spirit, right? But you don't know it, which implies it's another implication that his true name is Nyarlathotep.
Gotcha.
So that's what Nephren-Ka means. Of course, Lovecraft would have gotten that by accident, not on purpose. And other people argue that Nephren doesn't come from Nepher, but from Neph, which means great lady, and that Nephren-Ka was a girl. Okay. So if you want a female pharaoh a la Hatshepsut, and female pharaohs did traditionally get their names stricken from all monuments and records, which is a thing that happened to many pharaohs, not just Nephren-Ka. It happened to Akhenaten, it happened to Hatshepsut, it happened to other pharaohs who were on the outs with their immediate successor. So it's not exclusive sign of Nyarlathoteping. But there we are. That's Nephren-Ka. That's what we know.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ken, for information on Nephren-Ka. And again, in the show notes, I will have information on how you can find Ken's Kickstarter. Thank you again, Ken.
Right. No, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
I could have gone on even longer.
Thanks again to Ken, and also check the show notes for that Kickstarter we're talking about. It should still be going on by the time this episode airs originally. And now it's that time for Dave's Corner of the Internet, where David Heath talks to us about whatever it is that we're talking about. So we don't have any official music, but you should check out
Dave's Underground Goat Shenanigans, which appears on this podcast stream every Thursday. So check that out, or whenever I get an episode edited together for Dave. So check that out. All right, thank you so much, and we will now be listening to Dave talk. Okay, here we go.
My name is David Heath, and I write a blog called Dave's Corner of the Universe. When the call went out for someone to talk about Egypt, I quickly jumped on the offer, and I wanted to talk about Nitocris, the Queen of the Ghouls. Before I talk about who she was, let me tell you first how I came across her. And in truth, I knew who she was. I knew the name. I think I even knew the story. But my first real experience with her would have been in a Call of Cthulhu module, almost campaign setting. It was called The Unseen Masters. It was set in modern time. It was 3 different adventures, and the final one was called Coming of Age. And in reality, it was more of a campaign setting idea than a traditional adventure. As I remember, it took up about half this 200-page book. It was a good bulk of it and had a lot of history. And one of the main characters was Nitocris, the Queen of the Ghouls. And she was one of these unseen masters who manipulates things from afar. And sometimes, and I'm not going to spoil it, sometimes she's actually in the player's face manipulating things. But that was my first experience with her. And so I kind of ranked her up there with sort of some form of Illuminati or cabal or conspiracy. So in truth, any time I did a role-playing game that I had some sort of world-spanning conspiracy or magic cabal, I put Nitocris in there. So that was my first really experience, deep diving, sort of immersing myself in Nitocris' world. I have, of course, read her name in Lovecraft stories, and they were just sort of throwaway statements, I think. At least that's how I looked at them at the time. But let me go ahead and sort of explain her story. Nitocris, first of all, probably wasn't real. Even though historians like Herodotus and Josephus say she probably wasn't. Most scholars think that it was actually a typo or a separation. She's supposed separation of page incorrectly. She was supposed to be the last pharaoh of the 6th Egyptian dynasty. And what people think now is that it was actually a male pharaoh with a long name, and the rest of the name was cut off for some reason, and it was shortened to Nitocris, who is a female name, and so this story grew up around her. So the story goes that Nitocris was Queen of Egypt, and she was married to her brother, who was king, as they did in, the ancient Egyptian empire. And this was more than just sort of a political arrangement. She really, really loved her husband. And they were more figureheads than anything else. That really, there was a group of counselors and advisors that actually ruled the empire, the kingdom, and the day-to-day, and they were just figureheads. And the story goes that the king made a mistake or something and did something in a war that really bothered the advisors, so they had him killed. And this upset Nitocris, but she couldn't show it. That she knew that if the advisors found out that she was upset or plotting revenge, they would have killed her. So what she does is she gets her slaves and her engineers, and she builds a tunnel underneath the Nile. And under the Nile, she builds this huge banquet room and throws this big party, this big banquet for all her advisors. Now, they're suspicious, but they go anyways. And once they're there, she locks them in, and she releases the floodgates, and the Nile floods them out. Now, Nitocris, she knows that her time is up. She knows that, the supporters of the advisors and the counselors, they're all going to go after her. So she locks herself in this underground room and starts a fire, and it sucks all the air out, so she dies rather peacefully as opposed to, being tortured and killed. And that's the story of, Nitocris, the queen of Egypt, the last of the 6th dynasty pharaohs. And more than likely, maybe there's some truth somewhere in that story, but more than likely, it's a myth. Now, in Lovecraft, Nitocris shows up in the story that he ghost wrote for Harry Houdini, under the pyramids or imprisoned with the pharaohs. It goes by both names. It's been published under both names, but it's basically the same story. It's credited to Harry Houdini, who might have come up with the idea, might have added a few personal stories like when he was in Egypt, but it's Lovecraft. And Houdini was happy with it. Lovecraft was happy with it because he got paid. In fact, he lost the original manuscript, so he spends his honeymoon reciting it to Sonia Green, who typed up, the version we have now on their honeymoon because he lost the original version that it was the deadline for on a train. So in that story, Lovecraft has Houdini quote Thomas More about Nitocris and the subterranean nymph that dwells amid the sunless gems and glories hid, the Lady of the Pyramid. Now, let's be honest, Lovecraft really doesn't do women justice in his stories. I think even his most ardent defenders are going to agree with that. So, Nitocris in this, when they finally see it, or Houdini's character sees it, she's beautiful in profile, but then she turns her face, and the whole other side, when she turns, the whole other side of her face is all eaten by rats and skull. And that's actually a rather horrific vision of this beautiful woman becoming this monster just by turning her head. Now, the reason that Nitocris becomes so important to Lovecraft is because in October 1919, he met one of his heroes who talked about Nitocris, and that was Edward Plunkett, the 18th Baron of Dunsany. So Lord Dunsany was everything Lovecraft wasn't. A successful, rich writer, sophisticated, English, everything that Lovecraft wanted but wasn't. And so he was so excited that he was going to go to where Lord Dunsany was talking, and he could actually hear his idol talk. To Lovecraft, this was a life-changing event. To Lord Dunsany, it was basically Thursday. Nowhere in his private writings is there anything that mentions that he talked to Lovecraft or Lovecraft stood out to him. Several other people that he met, including members of the Amateur Writing Association, and that he would donate things to them. So it was an event, and he definitely recorded some things in his personal journals, but nothing about meeting anybody that looked like or described like Lovecraft. Now, Lovecraft, however, was absolutely impressed by this. And so that's one of the reasons why I think he uses Nitocris in his story. But Lovecraft wasn't the only writer to sort of be influenced by this story. In 1927, Weird Tales published is a story about Nitocris written by Thomas Laner Williams III. Now, you're going to know him better by his later pen name, Tennessee Williams, the man who wrote A Streetcar Named Desire, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. He wrote a short story called Nitocris's Revenge. And I've read it, and it's everything you would expect from a 16-year-old who would later become a titan in the English language. But he was still 16 years old, and, so it's definitely a 16-year-old boy's story, but it shows you that he's got potential. Now, this was, as far as I know, the only weird tale that Tennessee Williams published. He wrote a couple more, I understand, but never went any farther. So, absolutely, he is a great American playwright, a great American dramatist. But part of me wonders, what if he had stayed on the pulp? Could he have been maybe another Isaac Asimov or Ray Bradbury? I really would like to have seen more pulp writing from Tennessee Williams. Strange trivia fact, too, that the weird tales that it was published in, the cover story for that month was the first of Robert E. Howard's Solomon Kane stories. Robert E. Howard, of course, is most famous for creating Conan, but he also wrote a story about this Puritan adventure called Solomon Kane, and it appeared. His first story appeared on the same volume of Weird Tales that Tennessee Williams' story did. So there we have it, from Queen to legend to role-playing game NPC to Queen of the Ghouls to revenge story written by a 16-year-old genius. There we have Queen Nitocris. My name is David, and you can find me both at my blog, Dave's Corner of the Universe, but also on my new podcast, Dave's Underground Goat Shenanigans. See you there.
All right, here we are finally with Nitocris by Ashley Diosys, who you can find her book in the show notes and probably see her around every early October, first weekend of October at the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival. That's where I run into her at. All right, thank you so much, and here we go.
Nitocris by Ashley Diosys. Beneath the yawning gateways, underneath the last third pyramid, the Ghoul Queen sleeps within the vast, nethermost onyx temple in the void below. She sleeps amid rich gems, untouched by sunlight's glow, and with the mummies that are neither man nor beast. Still living, she was buried for a deadly feast. Some shunt her pyramid beneath Egyptian moons. Queen Nitocris was a legend amid the desert dunes. The great sixth dynasty portrayed a nymph in youth. How easily she lured her foes in peace, in truth. She offered them unto the Nile and drowned them all, by throwing wide the water gates in Temple Hall. Her cachinnation echoed still as she was thrown into her grand sarcophagus of golden stone. She lies there with him of the Sphinx as tales were told, he of the second pyramid, Khephren of old. So far beneath the ground he wed the ghoulish queen, and with her ruled over the mummies vaguely seen. The horrors Egypt hides endure in olden tombs, where phantom priest processions still disperse the fumes of richest resins as they offer up their gods, unspeakable dread sacrifice impaled on rods. The mummies without souls and hordes of devil cursed, pharaonic dead and restless cause no wicked thirst, amid the onyx darkness of the queen and king. The queen awaits whatever desert sands may bring. The stone colossi marched at endless night and drove the herds of grinning androphinxes down a cove, to shores of stagnant rivers, black as pitch and cold. It was her necromancy that called through the holes, to lure the dead and servants there so she could steal the spirits out of victims lost and make them kneel before her as sweet sacrifices or new slaves. Each new offering would fall into their graves if they should merely glimpse her visage, for the fools would see her face was gnawed by rats and starving ghouls. After H.P. Lovecraft's Under the Pyramids.
Thanks everyone for listening to People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. This has been Episode 1, Series 11, People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. Check us out at PGttCM.com and find out what we have to offer, what stuff we have in our store, episodes that you haven't heard, shows that you haven't listened to, cool stuff like that. And of course, you can help keep the lights on, help us update our equipment, which breaks from time to time from when we move from studio to studio, or just through wear and tear. And you can do that by going to PGttCM.com, of course, and donate there. Or you can go to paypal.me/PGttCM. If you don't want to do that and you just want to help out the show in other ways, you can always tell your friends about it, rate, review, and subscribe on Stitcher, on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, any of that stuff, since we are there now. All right. Thank you again so much. New episode next month. If you want to hear these episodes on a bi-weekly basis, I can try and do that, but I need a little bit of money to do that, just because of the fact that, I don't know, it's, takes time to do all this stuff. And thank you again so much. Thank you for listening, and have a good day. Thanks to Ken Height. Thanks to Ashley Diosis. Thanks to David Heath. Thanks everyone who listens. You're great. All of our listeners overseas, all of our troops overseas who are listening, I support you. Everyone who's out there who listens to the show, thank you for listening. All the bots out there that keep my numbers boosted, good job. And most of all, thank you to everyone out there who tells other people about it or asks for stickers or any of that stuff. And if you want any of that stuff, just message me and I'll make it happen. Thank you again, and stay squiggly and keep it weird. All right. No. Keep it weird and stay squiggly? No. Keep it squiggly and stay weird. It's one of those.